Dear chess friends, welcome to the of Chess channel and welcome to the most evil attack play by Stockfish 16 against Leela C Zero from the TCEC Season 25 Superfinal that you can follow now on the official and beautiful TCEC website. The attack that you see now, I think, is really the devil's work. The attack that you see now, I think, should not be watched by kids or maybe by people with a weak heart. This is so brutal. This is so crazy. This is so epic. This is really one of the greatest chess games that I've seen in my life. Put your seatbelts on and enjoy again in a spectacular gameplay by these two top engines. So, with the white pieces, the fish opened with the move e4. Leela's response was e5, knight to f3, d6, d4. We have now the Philidor defense on the board. And now the last pre-arranged move by the organizer was now the move bishop to g4. Here Stockfish simply continued with d takes e5. If black, for instance, continued in this line d takes e5, this wouldn't be good. Then after a couple of trades of queens, we're getting out of this pin, and then we can, of course, pick up the pawn on e5. This is not a good continuation anymore for black. Or what you could do here maybe is to play the move bishop to f3, but now after queen to f3, d takes e5, and bishop to c4. This leads now into this famous Paul Murphy game in which Paul Murphy played queen to b3, hit the pawn on f7, hit also the pawn on b7, knight to c3, bishop to e3, queenside castling, doubling up rooks on the d file is devastating. So the activity that white is here is simply too much, I think, to handle here for black. So that's why after d takes e5, here Leela C Zero continued with knight to c6. Stockfish plays now again e takes d6, bishop to d6, and Leela C Zero calculates that this should be at least some kind of a compensation for the lost pawn, because all three minor pieces are out already for black. So it's, I think, a good activity that Leela C Zero got here for the lost pawn. At least something. You saw in these other lines, I think the game would not be good then for black. So after move bishop to d6, we have h3 by the fish, bishop to h5, knight to c3, queen to d7. You see, Leela C Zero plays now on a fast development style. Players, of course, queenside castling. Stockfish plays bishop to b5, pins now the knight. We have a6, bishop to a4, queenside castling, and now Stockfish gets out of this potential mess here on the d-files. Here knight from g to e7, played by Leela C Zero. We have g4, bishop to g6, and now bishop to g5. Here Stockfish is also preparing queenside castling, because kingside castling would not be, of course, a good continuation, because you have already exposed yourself here with the h3 g4 structure. You have many dark square problems. The attack on the king side here would be also here too much to handle on the if you castle kingside h5 comes immediately. There are some tactics here around the square h3, so this is, of course, not a good continuation for white if white in any of these lines castles kingside. So here after bishop to g5, f6 by Leela C Zero. But you can guess what the fish is doing. The fish is not retreating. Stockfish plays immediately queenside castling. This is the way they go. If you play f takes g5, this wasn't played in the game, but of course we're curious. After f takes g5, we're playing immediately move e5. We get our pawn back, we get our piece back, and again, white has a great activity. Will eventually include the rook into the game. The bishop is still very, very unpleasant to handle. Many dark square problems here. So again, not a good continuation here for black. So after queenside castling, that's why b5 by Leela C Zero. Stockfish continues now with bishop to e3. Very, very wild stuff. Still the bishop on a4 is hanging, but actually Leela C Zero cannot take out now the bishop on a4. Look what would have happened if, for instance, black would have continued with b takes a4. This wasn't playing the game, I'm pointing out, but I was really curious. Why didn't Leela C Zero simply take out now the bishop on a4? Look what would have happened. Queen to a6 first, a check. Now we play queen to b5. After a couple of checks, now we play again e5. Again e5 is working. Very, very wild stuff. For instance, you're continuing, of course, with f takes e5. Now we play queen to b5, and now knight takes e5. This is the way to go. For instance, if you continue with knight to e5 in this particular line, then we play again a new check, and after queen to a7 and queen to a8, you're simply getting checkmated, because the knight is a very important defender of the square a7 here. Also, if you, of course, continue with bishop to e5, then we simply pick up the queen, which should be also perfectly fine here for white. Okay, black has some material here for the lost queen, but still the king is very, very vulnerable here on this side of the board, so it's not working. So what should black do? After After knight to e5, what you could do is, of course, also to retreat with the queen. But now look at this. After queen to a6, king to b8, now rook to d5 is simply the stunning tactic with preparations to play the move rook to b5. If you play knight to d5, then of course knight to c6 is winning the game, and there's simply not a good way anymore to stop rook to b5. So this would be really, really devastating. You could of course here try something like knight to e5, but then look at this again. Brutal tactics would come for sure. Look at this, bishop to a7, you have to step back, bishop to b6 again, and you check, and now rook takes d6. This is the way they go, getting rid of the key defender of the square c7. Here you can of course pick up the rook, but then you get checkmated. Really, really wild stuff. In this particular line, after rook to d6, you have to actually bring the queen into the defense, and you lose the queen of course, and probably also then afterwards the game. So brutal tactics after the potential b takes a4. So that's why Leela C Zero didn't play this one, but I think everyone was curious why really Leela C Zero didn't pick up the bishop here on a4. Really, really wild stuff. So that's why after bishop to a3, Leela plays now an interesting move h5, which is really crazy how this pawn on h5 is actually connected to this bishop on a4, because the tactics here that Leela C Zero and Stockfish are playing are spread all over the board. Actually, this pawn on h5 is somehow connected to the possibility that we can take out now the bishop on a4, because here Stockfish continue with the move g5. Now after b takes a4, finally Leela C Zero took, and after here the move queen to a6 that of course Stockfish played. For instance, if you try here now e5, like in this previous line that we have seen that could work, actually in this particular line it's not working, because in the previous line, let's go back here, after b takes a4, still the pawn was on g4. Now in this line, after potential e5, you see here there is this possibility by after f takes e5 and knight to e5, black can actually go into this line with queen to f5, because in the previous line, as I said, the pawn was on g4 and controlled the f5 score. Now Leela C Zero would have also here a checkmate threat on c2. Really, really wild stuff. So you see, as I said, how crazy this move h5 by Leela C Zero is actually connected somehow to this bishop on a4. Really, really crazy. So as I said, g5, finally Leela C Zero took the bishop on a4. Stockfish, of course, plays now the move queen to a6. Leela C Zero goes with king to b8, but of course Stockfish is not playing now anymore the move e5. So we have now queen to a4. Slowly but surely, Stockfish grabs more and more pawns, which is in some lines a good choice, because this game, if black defends, could maybe reach the fully endgame stage. We should not forget about also potential endgames. Of course, you want to smash your opponent, or of course you want to destroy him. Of course, his king is naked. Of course, you're trying to search for tactical possibilities. But if you can grab some pawns, meanwhile, it's also not a bad idea, because, as I said, if the game reaches the endgame stage, at least you want to have enough pawns on the board to battle, because you are down a piece. We should not forget about it. But so far, you see the Stockfish has now still 7 pawns on the board. Leela C Zero has only 4 pawns on the board, so Stockfish grabbed now 3 pawns, which is a decent compensation for the lost piece. After queen to a4, we have knight to c8 by Leela C Zero. Leela brings more defenders into the game. Knight to h4 by the fish, bishop to f7, g takes f6, g takes f6. Now check by Stockfish 16. Leela goes here, and now after knight to f5, again a new piece comes into the attack. We have bishop to e6 by Stockfish. We have queen to a6, and you check. After knight to a7, here good defensive move by Leela. Stockfish plays, of course, the move knight to d4, hits now the bishop on e6. For instance, if you play here the move c5, look how crazy this attack actually by the knight against this bishop is. Many of us, I think, would try to defend this position with the move c5 instead of retreating. Leela played bishop to f7, but if black, for instance, would have played here the move c5 immediately, then actually after knight to e6, queen to e6, the problem is now the queen is lined up now on the 6th rank, and after rook to d5, you have to get somehow out of this mess. You cannot, of course, move the bishop. You would love to move the bishop somewhere, but then the queen is hanging. Actually, you have to move the queen, but now white can double up rooks on the d file. very wild line it would be also for sure here. For instance, you're trying to get the rook into the game. We play now b4, very crazy. You play c takes b4, now knight to b5. We continue the attacking flow. You can of course here retreat, but now the issue is here after bishop to a7, for instance, you play bishop to a7, queen to c6, now knight to a7, knight to a7. We deliver a couple of checks. Look at this, and now after rook to c5, the game is over. If you of course play towards this side of the board, then you lose the tactical battle around the square d8. This similar thing happens, for instance, if you play here knight to a7, then again knight to a7. You can of course play queen to a7, but now after a couple of trades of pieces, again the battle is lost on the d file. Very crazy. So see, you cannot play immediately the move c5. You have to first retreat with your bishop. So that's why Leela C Zero played bishop to f7. Stockfish continues with a very calm, it seems like a calm move, but this move is really epic. This move is really spectacular. It's a brilliant move. It uses now the open g file in order to continue the pressure here against black. Many of us, I think, would not play this particular move. Many of us, I think, would try maybe something like here, knight to b5, doubling up rooks on the d file, maybe f4 e5 to search this kind of opportunity. Rook to g1, spectacular move. You see now why this move is so brutal, because now the rook will come in a beautiful way into the game. So here c5 finally by Leela C Zero. Now when the bishop is not hanging here on e6, Stockfish has now to play the move knight to b5. You cannot of course play knight takes b5 because of the pin, so that's why here bishop to c4. Look how Leela is also finding very interesting defensive ideas. We have a4, Stockfish protects now the knight, king to b8 gets finally out of this a file attack, b3 by the fish, and after bishop takes b5, a takes b5. The pawns are rolling here. Also there is now a huge threat with b6. That's why Leela C Zero played the move queen to b7, and in the beginning it seemed to me that this is defendable. This is really great defensive tactic here that Leela C Zero played, simply trading off more pieces, going into a favorable endgame. But Stockfish has grabbed now many pawns already, and Stockfish would try to grab more of them to reach maybe, as I said, a simply better endgame. So after queen to b7, Stockfish continues again with a similar idea. Rook to d5. Let's see options. Let's see options what black can play. For instance, one of the bad idea is to play maybe move rook to f8. You maybe are trying to get the rook somehow into the game, but then of course white simply continues again with this idea. You can try maybe queen to a6. We pick up here the piece. You're trying maybe to retreat, and after bishop to c5, you have lost another pawn. Look at this. We have here 3 connected pass pawns. Here we have 3 versus 2. So 4 pawns it would be for the lost minor piece, which is I think simply too much. The many pieces will be traded off in the next couple of moves. So in my opinion, this is not working. So what you could do here after rook to d5 is of course immediately trade off the queens, but again with similar problems. B takes a6, you have to retreat. Now we play rook to g7. Look how important it was to play the move rook to g1. Now maybe trade off knight to d5. You're trying to retreat with the bishop, and again this bishop is lost, so it's really not working. For instance, what you could try here after rook to d5 is also knight to e7, but now we simply retreat. You're trying to battle again. The c5 is weak. We simply trade it off. You will get again attacked on the 7th rank. You trade it off, but now the pawn on c5 is falling, and again you reach this kind of a picture in which, okay, black has 2 minor pieces, but white has simply too much pawns on the board. So this is also not working. So that's why after rook to d5, here Leela C Zero tried knight to b6, kicking away the rook. Stockfish plays now a spectacular rook takes d6, sacrifices even the rook here. Really wild stuff. After rook takes d6 and bishop to c5, what should black do? One of the options is to retreat here to e6, keeping simply your knight on b6 protected. That's one option. This wasn't played in the game. In the game, Leela tried rook from knight from a to c8. So let's see options if you play rook to e6. Now it gets again brutal. It's almost like it's really devil's work here that Stockfish is pulling off. It's really like Stockfish is controlling all of the board, all of the squares on the board. Really wild stuff. Now actually white can even go with queen to b7. Why should anyone trade off the queens when you are on the attacking side? But now look at this. We're rook to g7. You have to step back. Now comes the stunning knight to d5. very wild stuff. For instance, you try knight takes d5. We first pick up here the knight with a check. Now we pick up the knight, and again you have the problems. We have now suddenly 4 connected pawns and the bishop for the lost rook. It's simply too much to handle here for black. What you could do here after move knight to d5, as I said, is also maybe to play knight to c8, controlling simply here the knight on b6. But look how crazy this attack would be. Knight to b4 with the preparation to play knight to c6, and in some lines maybe even deliver checkmate. For instance, you try king to a8, get out of this mess. We play knight to c6. If you don't want to give up the rook for the exchange, you have to play something like, I don't know, rook to e8. But now the winning idea here is a beautiful f4. Look how crazy this pawn on f4 is connected somehow to the attack on this side of the board. Here you can of course try rook to e4, but now you get this one, bishop to b6, knight to b6, and as I said, that's the huge threat. Rook to a7, a beautiful checkmate. So in one moment, the problem is now that with the move f5, the rook will actually be deflected from the defense of the 6th rank, so it's simply not working. Of course, you can always, I think, give up here the rook for knight or something. But actually, as I said, this is simply too much to handle. This is simply not working because 3 pawns here with the support of the bishop, with the support of the rook, again, a devastating position here for black. So that was our analysis after bishop to c5. Here, as I said, many options for black, but as I said here, after knight to c8 here, that Leela C Zero played. Stockfish again played the beautiful queen to b7, simply traded off more pieces and goes now into favorable endgame. Stockfish delivers a check. Again, Leela has to step back. Rook to f6 attacks now simply the pawn on f6. Rook on g6, pardon me, attacks the pawn on f6. We have knight to d7, king to b2. So we have reached now again a similar picture. Stockfish has now 3 connected passers against the knight, and still here a 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the king side. Has also the much more active rook, has also the much more active king, which is, I think, a great compensation for the lost minor piece. So it's a devastating position again for black. We have rook to c8, we have f4, we have rook to h8. So Leela C Zero doesn't have even good moves. King to a3, rook to e8, and now e5. You cannot take, of course, because we pick up the knight on d6. So that's why knight to f5. We have now e takes f6. Stockfish simply grabs another pawn. Very crazy. We have knight to e3, king to b2, rook to f8, knight to e4, now knight to d5, and finally Stockfish is going also for the h5 pawn. We have knight takes f6, knight takes f6. If you play here knight takes f6, then rook to f5 is the problem. That's the issue. You're getting pinned. You're getting freezed here by one rook. So again, one rook is controlling both pieces by black. You can continue, of course, with king to c7, but now we suddenly push the pawns further. If, of course, you want to trade off the pawns, the rooks here on the f-file, not the problem, I think, here for white. We trade off the rooks, go with our king here towards the center, push this pawn, push also this pawn, so the knight would be then stretched. The knight cannot defend both sides, so again, not a good continuation. So that's why for knight to f6, rook to f6 had to be played, but of course, Stockfish simply picks up now another pawn here. That's why also rook to f4, of course, by Leela C Zero, but now slowly and surely, Stockfish gets again the rook very active. Really wild stuff. We have king to c8, now finally c4, rook to f3, and king to b4. The king is perfectly protected now by these 3 pawns. Maybe you can always deliver 1 or 2 checks, but never perpetuals. The king is perfectly fine here. On the other hand, black's rook is simply cut off by the rook's activity, and also this pawn is marching on the edge of the board. We have knight to f6, rook to h6, we have king to b7, h4. Stockfish pins the knight. You have to again step back, rook to h5, rook to f4. Stockfish gets closer with the king, again the pin. Again, Leela has to step back. Rook to h6, sort of a Zugzwang idea, forcing black to make a move now with the king, and now finally pushing the pawn further. We have rook to f3, king to b4, we have rook to f4, and now rook to g5. What should you do? If you play here knight to f6, then again king to a5. You cannot, as I said, control with the knight both of the sides that are favorable for white here. So you can maybe attack this pawn, but again, then the knight is far away from the action on the queen side. So nothing is working here for black. Have rook to g5, we have king to d6. Stockfish simply push the pawn further. Leela goes behind, but now we're moving up. You see, now the pawn is already the 6th rank, and it's now protected by the rook. We have king to c7, king to a5, Stockfish again attacks the knight. Now the king is coming closer. We have rook to h6, and now a simple move b6. Of course, trying to connect now 2 pawns, and in some lines deliver checkmate. We have rook to h8, Stockfish delivers a check, corners now the king, and now simply pushes the pawn further. We have c6, rook to e6, Stockfish plays, of course, rook to d7. You cannot pick it up because rook to d8 is a beautiful checkmate. So that's why here rook to e8, Stockfish plays now the beautiful b7, king to b8, and after move c7 we have reached now this epic and spectacular checkmate by both of the pawns on the 7th rank against Black's king. So this was brutal. This was very, very epic what the fish did here. Really crazy attack. Very, very wild ideas. Immortal game here by Stockfish with tactics all over the board, with tactics that basically are starting on the king side, but as we saw, the king side was always somehow connected to the queen side, so it was so stretched, it was so crazy, and then reaching this kind of an endgame. Very, very brutal stuff here by Stockfish 16. So in this TCEC Superfinal, Stockfish is now leading by 3 points against Leela C Zero after more than 30 rounds. So we will see. Still nothing is lost, but the fish is winning this favorable openings for white and manages to somehow pull off some draws in some other lines. Leela C Zero loses always the opposite game, wins also some games with the white pieces, but then immediately loses also the opposite game. Stockfish wins the game with the white pieces and sometimes at least makes a draw, which is now the huge difference in the TCEC Superfinal. So far the fish is dominating and of course has now great chances to win a new TCEC competition. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas here of the Philidor Defense. If you want to see some other epic chess games here on my YouTube chess channel, check out our commented chess games played by computer series, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.